Migration Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Everyday Geography Podcast. I'm here today with Mette Carlson from the Peace Research Institute in Oslo, Norway. She's a research professor focusing on global migration. She's here today to talk about the latest research on how migration arises. In other words, the push and pull factors of migration. Hello, Mette. Can I first ask you to tell us about your research areas?
Hi, it's great to be here on the podcast. Yes, my main research addresses theories of migration and transnationalism.
Okay, although we're all familiar with migration and its meanings, I'm not so sure about transnationalism. Could you explain that, please?
Sure. Transnationalism is the connections between people who have migrated and people who remain in the country of origin. We are increasingly seeing this as an important concept in the experience of migration, and it's currently a hot topic for research.
Okay, I'd like to come back to that later in the podcast if there's time. First, though, I'd like you to give an overview of current research on your main interest, and that is the push-pull factors of migration. I believe you and your colleagues have recently undertaken a systematic review of all recent research. Am I right in thinking that a systematic review is a summary of all the research published on a particular subject?
Yes, exactly. It gives us a thorough picture of what questions the research has and hasn't answered, and identifies important research areas by systematically searching and analyzing the published research.
That sounds like a very helpful way of examining an issue from a research perspective. What were your main findings?
Well, my colleagues and I actually defined 32 determinants of migration. This includes the traditional concepts of economic factors, conflict, and natural disasters, as well as more recently, climate crisis factors. However, there are also a range of individual factors which combine with the external factors to create a complex network of reasons for migration.
Okay. Well, that is far more complex than the traditional list of push and pull factors. Are they not relevant anymore?
Well, of course, economic factors still play a role, but the traditional idea that migration is the result of simple push and pull factors and has no emotional or cognitive basis is, I am afraid, rather outdated now. Scholarship on emotions and human mobility provides insight into how emotions are involved in people's plans to migrate, their interactions with people met through the process of migration, attachments to homelands, and a sense of belonging in new environments. It's important to humanize migration and to blur the boundaries between different types of migration by seeing the individual identity of migrants.
I can see that, but how does the research look at emotions? It's always hard to define and describe human emotion.
Yes, that's true. So what we did was classify all the different individual emotional determinants of migration as migration aspiration.
Now there's a term that needs some explanation.
Well, we all know that aspirations refer to desires, wishes, and preferences. So the term migration aspiration is really a catch-all phrase to describe how an individual might see all the possibilities of migration. For example, they may see the possibility of food security. In other words, having enough food to eat. Or they may see being able to afford or be given medical care. These are the aspirations, and they may be far from the reality of their lives before migration. They might also see the potential for personal transformation within the context of migration. One example might be going abroad to study in order to transform oneself from an unskilled manual worker into an educated professional. In any of these examples, the migrant has the belief that leaving home would be better than staying. This view of migration determinants that is, causes of migration, moves far beyond the more simplistic idea that migration is caused by a set of external push and pull factors.
Okay, I can see now how you focus on the individual in this concept of migration.
Well, it's not purely individual. There is a collective aspect at work here, which reflects the role of the community in shaping aspirations. In other words, how a community views and experiences migration will directly affect individual aspirations and choices. This is how we see cultures of migration emerge. A culture of migration is where a community has established destinations of migration. So, for example, we see large Hispanic communities in the US where generations of people from the same home community have emigrated from, for example, Mexico, and have established communities in the same location in the US.
Another term that needs defining. Would cultures of migration refer to groups of people who build a shared migration culture?
Exactly. In their home community, an individual may observe and learn about the successful story of migration and then start to build their own dream or aspirations about migration. The more people there are from a community who successfully migrate, the more powerful these aspirations can become. This can be particularly true of educational migration, where schools and communities can promote successful migration stories and present them as ideal success stories to be celebrated. This can have a powerful effect on developing migration aspirations in others.
So what role do actual migration experiences from the migrant community have?
That's a good question. The way we have traditionally looked at migration is that it's a one-way journey, whereby the migrant decides to migrate, makes the journey, and then arrives in a new destination. This view is also somewhat outdated. Another concept that emerged from the systematic review was that of transnationalism.
Okay, and how do you define transnationalism?
Well, transnationalism refers to the links between the migrant and the home communities. Research shows that these links may remain strong because these interlinked communities maintain social ties and share an economic and political life across nations or transnationally. A good example of this can be seen in remittances.
Could you explain what remittances are for our listeners, please?
Yes, they are international payments. And when we think about migrants, and particularly labor migrants, we see them sending regular payments back to their home country, to family members, and to the wider community. This is where new migrants keep close economic ties to their country of origin by sending part of their earnings home through remittances. In fact, in 2020, the total amount of remittances globally was $702 billion. Taking account of this transnational perspective is key to developing a full understanding of migration determinants, and again moves beyond thinking only about the traditional push and pull factors.
Well, that is interesting. I must admit I hadn't considered the effect of these transnational links in migration. How does this concept help us better understand migration?
Good question again. If we look at migration from a transnational perspective, we can increase our understanding of migration aspiration and the many factors that can have an influence on individual migrants beyond simple economic factors. I'd also like to talk about network theory if we have time, what it is, and why this is an area which is generating quite a lot of research at the moment.
Well, we are running out of time, but if you can summarize this concept briefly, we should be fine.
Okay, network theory claims that migration is an outcome of complex social decision-making, including family and friends. This network of family and friends not only provide information and help with the decision of whether to migrate or not, but may also provide financial support. This network not only provides help with the decision to migrate, but also with choosing the destination. As groups of migrants form new communities in a destination location, they become important bearers of information about the immigration process and the destination. Because of these networks, we also see migration becoming embedded in communities, with it being something the young undertake almost automatically, like a rite of passage on reaching a certain age. However, this network might also advise against migration. If, for example, there are too many migrants in one location, this might reduce work opportunities. So in that case, the network may discourage migration. Overall, we found that these networks have a cumulative power on individual migrants. Simply put, the more people from a community who successfully migrate to a particular destination, because of the support offered by the network, the more likely it is that more individuals from that community will migrate to that same destination.
Yes, I can see that these networks could have a powerful influence over individuals, especially the young and impressionable.
Yes, this is a socially based theory to explain migrant flows and migration decisions. If we go back to the push-pull model of migration, we can see that this does not fully explain patterns of migration in the same way that migration network theory might provide an explanation for features of migration, such as migration corridors.
Well, I'm afraid we have to end it there for today. You've given us plenty of food for thought and have challenged the simplistic view of migration. So thank you, Mette, for highlighting these issues for us. Please let us know your response to these issues in the usual social media channels. We look forward to next week's episode on environmental education.